Disclaimer: the views and opinions expressed in this episode are those of the guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of USA Global TV and Radio. The content presented is for informational purposes only and is intended to foster open discussion and debate. Viewer discretion is advised. USA Global TV and Radio does not endorse any particular viewpoint and encourages viewers to seek out additional information and perspectives. Saving America with Dr. David D. Schein.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.
Welcome to Saving America. This is your host, Dr. David D. Schein. Here are some of the top stories from the last week. The headline is, State Department responds to CCP's escalating attacks on Falun Gong in the U.S. Of course, the reality is that the CCP has little respect for anyone outside their closed circle. This is especially true of the inept Biden-Harris administration. In a prior Saving America, I introduced Falun Gong to my audience. This is a group that focuses on self-reflection and meditation. In Red China, there are 70 to 100 million followers. Of course, the insecure CCP losers like Z hate any competition for the minds of the peasants. What is especially disturbing is that this persecution of the followers has spread to the U.S. Those Chinese fortunate enough to get out of China are being harassed here, according to reports. The U.S. State Department reports that the CCP will surveil, threaten, and harass PRC nationals, including Falun Gong practitioners. An interesting sidelight in this is that leaked information pertaining to the CCP strategy for sabotaging Shen Yu Performing Arts. This is a New York-based classical Chinese dance company that was founded by Falun Gong practitioners. Many of us have seen their advertising, including their nice TV commercials. Apparently, the whack CCP consider even this performing group to be a threat to their false narrative of a communist utopia in China. The Shen Yu ads even say that they present China before communism. An interesting fresh headline from NTD says 2 men have pled guilty to a bribery scheme to take away the tax-exempt status of the Shen Yu Performing Arts. Kind of interesting, folks. I call on local law enforcement to coordinate with the State Department to investigate and prosecute any foreign actors who interfere with this peaceful sect. Trump slams Harris on inflation. My audience is well aware of the political battle between the Trump-Vance team and the Harris-Walz far-left team. Many also may be aware that the Biden-Harris backers are trying to rewrite history by falsely claiming that the inflation started under Trump, not them. Many of us find it fascinating that Harris has not taken any questions since the Dems' backroom deal that put her at the top of the ticket. In the meantime, her campaign has tried to change every far-left policy of hers to cover up what she really stands for. The days of her being called the failed border czar, calling for Medicare for all and elimination of private health insurance, and supporting domestic terrorists with bond money are being swept under the rug. In an interesting twist, one law enforcement official she includes in a TV commercial has come out to condemn her. Love that payback, folks. We're all looking forward to her actually answering real questions. In the meantime, the wrapping paper is really off the whack leftist Tim Walz governor of Minnesota. And remember, he was the governor during the burning of Minneapolis, where he did virtually nothing. He has had such a bad start that all of his stories seem to be contradicted by people who do not have a dog in the fight. I wonder if he'll be removed like the Dems did to George McGovern's VP candidate in 1972. Most of you listening do not recall that Thomas Eagleton, the U.S. Senator from Missouri, was forced to withdraw as McGovern's VP candidate after admitting that he had been previously hospitalized for nervous exhaustion and had undergone electric shock treatments. That latter part is the key thing. People were concerned about whether he was really okay. I guess the Dems aren't too worried about that, or they wouldn't have put Biden into office, huh? In the meantime, the Biden-Harris administration is desperately trying to get a Mideast peace deal in the face of an Iran attack. As Israel tries to stamp out Hamas and the cowardly Hamas continue to hide behind their own civilians, the Biden-Harris administration knows that they look weak and useless. Not a good look in a competitive presidential race. Continued attacks by Iran proxies is bad enough. However, there is fear that Iran will directly attack Israel, and the world will know just how useless our current administration is. Blinking fool may go down as the worst Secretary of State in history. How long has Iran penetrated the Biden-Harris administration? This is a great story that has received far too little attention. Why is the Biden-Harris administration so soft on Iran, including the prior Obama administration? The terrorist scum running Iran say they want to wipe out not only Israel, but the USA. Sounds like you'd want to take a really hard line to Iran, doesn't it? A hot air article suggests that this may be due to someone who is employed by both the Obama administration and now the Biden-Harris administration until very recently. That person is Rob Malley, who reportedly is under congressional investigations, plural. The report claims that two former aides to Malley were identified as members of an Iranian spy ring, one of whom is still working for the government. Whoa. Further, Phil Gordon is working for Harris as the national security advisor and apparently is tied up in this group. So if the campaign security advisor is soft on Iran, how does that bode well for the free world? It gets better, folks. Operating in the open in the USA is the National Iranian American Council, NIAC. It's a non-governmental organization that advocates in Tehran's interest. It is allegedly considered a spy organization by U.S. intelligence. So why are they still operating here, huh? In a story that has evolved, the Biden-Harris administration made a deal with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind of 9/11, and two of his deputies. They would get life in prison at Gitmo without having to face the death penalty. As public outrage ramped up overnight, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, also known to my audiences as Mr. AWOL, suddenly showed up to retract the deal. Time for these three to be hung and revived 1,000 times each to make up for the 3,000 deaths that they caused for 9/11. And remember, many hundreds and hundreds of others died later from exposure due to asbestos and other contaminants at the 9/11 site. I'm telling you, Harris cannot be trusted to watch out for the security of America. GARM got billions from the feds targeting conservatives using your tax dollars, folks. This is another evolving story. I stay pretty up on things, but I'd not heard of GARM, which stands for Global Alliance for Responsible Media. Frankly, folks, in 2024, anytime I read something that was set up for responsible media, I start smelling a rat. A new report by the Foundation for Freedom Online claims that 4 of the 6 largest global advertising agencies have received billions of dollars from the federal government. GARM is a project of the World Federation of Advertisers, WFA, which accounts for 90% of ad spending worldwide. Hey, maybe this needs to be under a monopoly investigation, hint, hint. The 4 agencies, IPG, Omicron, WPP, and Publicis Group, were shown to have received U.S. taxpayer dollars. A recent report by the House Judiciary Committee revealed that GARM has used its influence over internet revenue streams to pressure platforms, including threats against Twitter X, Spotify, and non-establishment media. I guess that's Newsmax and OAN and some of those folks. In a country that frequently claims superiority over the rest of the world due to the First Amendment to the Constitution, the suppression of conservative speech seems like a serious violation. And of course, the Biden-Harris crew keep claiming that Trump is the one to worry about regarding freedom. So Elon Musk sued Garm for effectively an illegal boycott of his Twitter X and other conservative media. Well, the brave people behind Garm just shut it down. It seems it was legit. Wouldn't it stand up and fight? Yes. How about federal air marshal whistleblowers exposing a weaponized TSA Quiet Skies program? The whistleblowers have reported that former Representative Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii, a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve and a 2020 Democratic presidential candidate, has been a target under the program, resulting in her being added to TSA's suspected terrorist watch list. Folks, I'm sorry, I don't know Tulsi Gabbard very well, but she would be way, way, way down the list if I was looking for people to add to the suspected terrorist list. I think this is a shame regardless of her political views. So it sounds to me like a mafia deal. Leave our gang, the Democrats, and we make sure you are punished. And about those freedom-loving Dems, Kamala Harris may have sent agents to raid a pro-life journalist's home after she met with Planned Parenthood. So a report in the Daily Signal covers the raid on reporter David Daladine's house. He's the founder of the Center for Medical Progress. This is an anti-abortion operation. There's nothing illegal about that. Had he been on the other side of the issue, he had probably been awarded a Pulitzer Prize. So he worked undercover to record what was going on. The allegations were that Planned Parenthood was selling the body parts of aborted fetuses. So in 2016, California, then Attorney General Kamala Harris meets with Planned Parenthood. Only 2 weeks later, Daladine's home was raided by the California Department of Justice, which under those circumstances may be a serious misnomer. This raid smacks of another coincidental raid, that of Matt Taibbi by the IRS the same day he was to testify before Congress about government abuse. The Biden-Harris administration has weaponized the IRS, having them make unannounced visits to taxpayers' homes to harass and intimidate them. Supposedly, this practice has been stopped. However, if Harris wins in November, look for that offensive to reawaken. The IRS uses its new employees to harass more taxpayers. So the Biden-Harris con job involves saying that the IRS increased staffing would go after rich cats who were not paying their fair share. However, many observers say it was to chase small dollar businesses. Remember the $600 trigger? Folks, I'm sorry, in the Biden-inflated America, $600 just isn't that much money. And it has to chase small dollar businesses and people like waiters and waitresses. So some people nearly fell down laughing when Kamala copied Trump's no taxes on tips platform plank. Yeah, well, why did you add all of those IRS agents chasing tipped employees if you were serious about not taxing tips? Russian prosecutors seek a 15-year treason sentence for U.S. citizen Ksenia Karolina. As I have already commented, the recent Biden-Harris prisoner swap was yet another failure of the administration. Here is a Russian who emigrated to the USA in 2012. She is visiting her family in Russia. They spy on her mobile phone and find out that she contributed, got it, $51.80 to a charity that may end up giving support to Ukrainian troops. On this basis, she was just convicted of treason. Again, she's not a Russian citizen anymore. The question is, why is she still in Russia after the big swap? She should not be. Got an electric car? It might be outdated sooner than you think. The EV automakers have accelerated the release of upgraded models, unlike the typical 5-year cycle for gasoline cars. Part of that is they're advancing the battery systems so EVs can run longer without a charge. Now, part of the problem with that is it may mean that those who have paid a lot of money for EVs may find that after just a few years that their street value becomes very low. Also, I am concerned because we're approaching about the 10-year cycle for Teslas, which were kind of the first full-service EVs out there, that are going to need battery replacement. The rumors I hear is that is going to be very expensive. As we grow up, a common reference for success or failure is the letter grade. Whether we're in grammar school or college, we all want an A grade and certainly regard an F as a big failure. Here at Saving America, we scan the news for reports of celebrities, politicians, or others who just end up in the public eye. So the A grades are awarded to people and organizations for great service to their communities, and the F grades, of course, are unfortunately more common, are awarded to those who need to do a lot better. So the badge of dishonor belongs to the morons from the judges to prison authorities who are not serving the public and in fact are not even protecting women who are incarcerated. Let's examine 3 recent reports. Yes, folks, this is a busy one. California, Wisconsin, and New Jersey. The prison system of states are allowing murderers and sexual predators to go into women's prisons. Why? Because these biological males claim they were now trans females. Yes, that's a new term, folks. Trans females. In the California case, the convict had been found guilty of murdering a lesbian couple and their son. Triple murder. First of all, why has this person not been executed? This is not complicated, folks. Dr. Schein is a big fan of the death penalty, and I can't, this is exhibit 1 of why we need the death penalty. There's no salvaging this situation. Secondly, why would you not make sure that the plumbing matches before you allow this trans male into a woman's prison? They now have an issue of pregnancy of sequestered women in the women's prison because they're letting these biological males pretending to be women into these prisons. Folks, we don't need to have a big debate. We should not let males into women's prisons unless they have been castrated, yes, folks, biologically adjusted, and are on hormones for some period of time so that they do not have the urge to have sex with women and possibly produce pregnancy, or to sexually assault women, which is rapidly growing in these women's prisons. It's not voluntary on their part. They're trapped with these people. It gets crazier, folks. The discredited operation known as the ACLU sued the state of Indiana over the denial of sexual reassignment surgery. Folks, I can't make this up, for an inmate who strangled his 11-month-old stepdaughter to death. This monster admits to murdering the girl, according to the news reports. Anyone with a brain should stop donating money to the ACLU and bring back the rapid death penalty for scum like this. Case number 3, moron judge refused to define woman and dismissed a lawsuit. This made a lot of news, folks, at the University of Wisconsin. I'm hoping this is going to go up on appeal and gets fixed. Why did the suit get filed? The sorority is trying to block a 6'2", 260-pound male who admits that he likes women in a sexual way, and it simply said, identify as female. The judge said, oh, well, then he has access to the sorority. Folks, it's Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority. I am totally in sympathy with them. A sorority should mean what it means. It is a collection of women who join together for their own satisfaction and protection. It should not have biological males running around in there, and I certainly hope this gets corrected at the appellate level. So the F grade today belongs to the judges and prison administrators who have allowed these horrendous situations to occur. One of the bitter ironies of the current focus on DEI in America is that not all minorities or protected groups are treated the same. And we welcome Stephanie Samsil. She's a senior at Towson University with a dual major in political science and mass communications. She has a journalism concentration. This summer, she is interning at the Heritage Foundation's marketing department. As an intern Capitol Hill reporter with the Media Research Center in 2022, she wrote more than 40 published news stories and questioned numerous members of Congress, including Senators Ted Cruz and Chuck Schumer. She has numerous articles and other publications. I became familiar with her as a result of her op-ed in the Daily Signal. We welcome Stephanie Samsel for her first appearance on Saving America.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dave.
We're happy to have you here. So our first question, please share with our audience a little about your background and some of your experiences in high school that even in high school started to form your opinion of DEI.
Absolutely. So I am a half Asian and half white college student from Maryland. I've attended public school all of my life, both K through 12 and at a public state university currently. I'm a senior. And so I know firsthand what it's like to be in these classrooms with very liberal professors, teachers, students, who all seem to come to this consensus that DEI is a wonderful, great thing that everyone should be on board with. And if you aren't on board with it, then you must be some raging white supremacist. Well, let me be an example that that is not true. Okay, I am against DEI. Not because I'm against diversity or I'm against inclusion. It's more so the middle term that I have an issue with, equity. Because proponents of equity are the first ones to say that it is different from equality, right? It is not enough for us to all be created equal, to all have equal opportunities. What they argue for is equal outcomes, equal representation across the board, no matter your race, gender, sexuality. And so these proponents are ignoring individual talents and individual merit that is the foundation, I think, for the American dream, right? We all want to work hard. We want to earn the positions by our merit and not because we check a box that gives CEOs a pat on the back, you know, they hit their racial quota or their diversity check. It should be because they care about us as people. They recognize our hard work and our character and our merit. So as far as my experience in high school goes, I remember being a senior, applying to these colleges. I used the Common App like everyone else. And so I had approached one of my teachers about what she thought I should write about in my essay, what topic. And she just looked me up and down through a screen because this was during COVID. She looked me up and down, squinted at my face and said, "Have you considered writing about your race in your college essay? Because you're clearly not white." And that baffled me. I was offended because I had known her for a while. I had looked up to her. She knew me as a great writer, and a lot of teachers had talked about how I had a very high GPA. I worked really hard on every assignment I was given. So to be reduced in that moment to my skin color, my status as a non fully white person, at least, like she didn't care about my work ethic in that moment. And she signaled to me quite clearly that these administrators, these people at these colleges cared more about what boxes I checked and what my skin color was as a minority than my accomplishments, my character, that type of thing. So from that moment on, I decided I would speak out about this, and I would do so respectfully, but truthfully.
That sounds great. And as you know, we asked 3 questions. Our second question, I came aware of you because of your essay in the Daily Signal. And in that, you reflect on your college experiences. What is your general reaction to how DEI is used in college? So we talked about high school. Let's talk about college.
Sure. I think just like in high school, it does a grave disservice to hardworking students, staff, faculty who work really hard for their research and their credentials. And the reason why I think it does a disservice is because it takes the focus away from hard academics, reading, writing, arithmetic. It takes the focus away from that and places it on, okay, this is how you are oppressed because you are not a white person. And we want you to know that the American dream just won't come as easily to you because you're just not white or you're not male. And that's ridiculous. That's a lie. And we should be empowering students with the truth and with our true history, with hardcore academics that get at the facts, that aren't so emotionally driven and don't pander to identity politics. And so I've been in these classrooms with students who have just shamelessly said to me, just like my high school teacher in a way, you know, Asian Americans today would be nowhere without Black people. I don't say anything. The professor doesn't say anything. Some people might chuckle, but they don't ask him or her to elaborate. They don't ask for the facts, and it's just kind of become this norm. Like, you don't speak out about that. If you do, you would be accused of being racist or homophobic or transphobic, whatever ist or ism you could attach to that. And it's sad that we've come to that point where we can't have substantial arguments anymore, and we can't argue with the truth. It's really just emotionally driven. And as far as like history goes, you know, people left and right in my classes will say, like, well, yeah, America is a systemically racist nation. Yeah, I agree with that. They can name which founding fathers owned slaves and so forth. But what they don't know, and what I didn't know until recently at Heritage, was that 80% of the slaves that were sold from Africa were shipped not to the US, but to Brazil. And it really, I'm not saying that to whitewash history or anything. I'm saying that because it gives you a fuller picture and a fuller context of what the world was like at that time. It wasn't just America. But from the narratives you hear in these classrooms, you would think, wow, America is just bad. We had a terrible founding. We should not be proud of it. We should not be proud to be Americans. And that's really sad. So I hope more people will, again, speak out, speak the truth, and try to counter these narratives that we should be ashamed to be Americans and that the American dream isn't real.
Well, I have some big predictions for your American dream. I very much think you're going to get there. Our question number 3 is, in your essay that I found, I may be biracial and have Asian heritage, but that identity has no bearing on my most important and fulfilling identities. Child of God, daughter of 2 great parents, proud sister, and friend to many. This is a wonderful, powerful statement. Share with our audience what experiences have prompted you to write that specific statement.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. Well, as I was writing this essay, I was aware that people would try to write me off as just another Asian American and, you know, again, boil me down to the exterior qualities that a lot of people would see just on first glance. But at the end of the day, we're all human and we're all searching for meaning. And so for me, that meaning is found in Christ. And I wish I could say to you that I've always felt that way, but it was something I really had to come into in my own time. As a baby, I was baptized in a Catholic church, and it actually wasn't until middle school, when my friend had introduced me to her hometown church, that I started attending for a couple years and then decided to get baptized. And that was the best choice of my life, because my faith reminds me of what truly matters. And it's not your position, it's not the boxes you check or who you know, it's where you come from. And your worth, my worth, comes from Christ and what he did for me. I'm not perfect. No one is perfect. And so it's grounded me on truth and peace when the world is crazy. And there are a lot of headlines and a lot of reasons to be sad, but Christ is what gives me hope. And so I listed my family second because I truly believe I would not be here without them either. They offered me a support system that I wish every child could get. Like, every child deserves to have a mother who, from a young age, tells them, like, you can be anything you want. If you have the work ethic, you have great character, just go for it. Like, everything you do, just give it your all. And so that's what I did. And I also had a great father whose hard work I could witness. My mom stayed at home, but my dad, worked hard to provide for us, and he still does. And I remember coming home from school in grade school, but also in college, where I would be doing homework at the dinner table and I would just think, man, like, when am I going to use this? When am I going to use trigonometry or so forth? And like a lot of students, I just thought, oh, I'm too good for this or whatever. And he said to me, you know, when I was your age, I also wasn't crazy about school. It wasn't until I got to college actually that I applied myself. And I realized, because I was paying out of pocket, that I was investing in myself. So education is an investment. And even after you graduate, you know, the rest of your life, it should be a learning experience. And so I took that to heart from a young age, that life is lifelong learning, and that's what it's about. And that's why I care so much about education and why I want to speak out about this and against DEI.
Very inspiring. How can our audience get more information about you and the things you're interested in?
Sure. Well, to read my op-ed, you could Google Daily Signal and my name, Stephanie Samsel. But my social media is at Stephanie Samsel on Instagram and at Steph Samsel on Twitter.
America's been struggling, but this is a point that I made in my first book, Decline of America, 100 Years of Leadership Failures. Unfortunately, I'd hoped that book, which was released in February of 2018 on President's Day, would help bring awareness to the need to improve the presidency and see if the United States could get better organized, get rid of the partisan bickering, and move forward toward making America more secure externally and internally, but also improving the status and the quality of our civilization. And sadly, we've been dealing with quite a few challenges here. I feel with Joe Biden, we've reached the bottom of the barrel of presidency. I'm surely hoping that we don't get any worse. And in the meantime, we've got China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea licking their lips and laughing at us as they abuse the environment. So much for this environmental sensitivity nonsense that's been going on. And frankly, if you want to talk about an existential threat, it is to America's security, certainly not this nonsense about climate change. First, America must secure its borders. It must act to crush the drug cartels in Mexico now, not later. When we see the headline about Americans killed and 3 missing on the other side of Mexico along the border, it tells us that Americans are not safe, and it's because the government of the United States is not respected, or at least feared, by the terrorists who are running these cartels. Second, about the same time, a headline that says Iran and Saudi Arabia are restoring diplomatic relations. That in itself is concerning, but the fact that China is credited as the mediator of that situation is even more disconcerting. The United States has lost its position as being the primary source of bringing the world together. And this is indeed another existential threat to the United States. Third, it gets better. There's a recent headline that China is ahead of the United States in roughly 45 out of 55 measures of technological advancement and accomplishment. The next war will not be a typical ground war. It will not be what's happening between Ukraine and Russia right now. It will be a technological war. The United States will need to control space, will need to control technology, will need to have a safe electronics and technical system parallel or beyond which nobody has seen so far. We put a man on the moon first. We've been a leader in a lot of different parts of technology. We need to get back to that and stop allowing China to steal our valuable technology. We've got to stop exporting our technology to China and other countries that cooperate with China. This must return to, unfortunately, what I witnessed, which was called the Cold War. Folks, we are in Cold War II, and we must win it. And the only way that we won Cold War I was by the fact that Russia and an incipient China at that time knew that they'd be wiped off the face of the map. They might hurt the United States, but in doing so, they would destroy their own country. Sadly, we must spend the resources now to assure China and its terrorist buddies that that will happen to them if they fool with the United States. We are not there technologically at the moment, but we must get there. We've got to get past the partisan bickering. We've got to stop throwing money down the toilet for useless programs. We've got to stop supporting half of the country that's not working by soaking taxes out of the other half that is working, and stop talking about taxing the handful of billionaires and start talking about spending money on defense, sending everybody else out to work unless they're legitimately disabled and truly unable to work. Time to get out there, get to work, get the job done. And America can do this. Business students, business persons, or consumers, business law impacts much of what you do. This segment is designed to help you get past the headlines on key stories. In a surprise unanimous ruling from the conservative-leaning U.S. Supreme Court, the court ruled recently that pro-life doctors do not have standing to challenge the Food and Drug Administration's removal of certain safety restrictions on a particular abortion drug. Now, this is a technical ruling. In the law, a plaintiff must have standing to bring a case. In plain English, it means the plaintiff must have a dog in the fight. The case was tied to the FDA's decision to loosen safety regulations for the abortion pill mifepristone in 2016 and 2021. Basically, the FDA made this drug readily available and authorized use without a direct doctor's supervision. The justices probed whether the doctors could prove that they were directly injured by those FDA decisions. The drug is specifically designed to be used in the early stages of pregnancy. To quote the Mayo Clinic, it is for pregnancy termination up to 10 weeks of gestation, offering a medical alternative to surgical procedures for abortion. So, the correct procedure was for the plaintiff doctors to follow the administrative procedures required by the FDA to challenge decisions in that agency. There are reasonable health concerns that a woman using this drug could have various side effects while not under the supervision of a doctor. The number one concern, although described as not common, is excessive vaginal bleeding. Now, because of the time frame involved, including rulings that go back by the FDA to 2016, basically, I believe this case has been terminated. And again, it has been in the news regarding the either the non-prescription distribution or prescription distribution, but not requiring doctor supervision once the drug has been given out. So it remains to be seen if this is causing an unusual number of problems. Recently, an administrative law judge, an ALJ for short, ruled in favor of Whole Foods on an important management matter. Employees of Whole Foods wanted to wear BLM masks, t-shirts, and other apparel during the 2020 riots. Understandably, Whole Foods management did not want to allow this to happen. Not good for the company, not good for employee discipline, etc. The employee's first shot was to claim racial discrimination. This claim washed out quickly, and the washout was upheld by the First Circuit Federal Court. Good to know. Next, the NLRB, the federal government, determined that this was an unfair labor practice, a ULP for short. The argument was that employees needed to wear the paraphernalia so that Black employees would somehow feel safer. The ALJ ruled in favor of Whole Foods on this issue. Now, it wasn't a total victory for Whole Foods. The ALJ also ruled that Whole Foods' policy of banning any pins or decals or whatever while working, well, actively working, was too restrictive, and that employees, if they belong to a union, could wear a union pin or something like that. And of course, this is done in other industries. So, it's clear to make sure that we bring both sides of the argument forward. Saving America welcomes Bill Sunshine. Bill's father from Ukraine was vehemently anti-Russian, and he refused to talk about Russia. Young Bill was eager to learn about and understand Russia, but during the Cold War years following World War II, Russia was largely closed to the West. So he continued his Russia studies at the University of Texas. Later, he graduated from the University of Texas School of Law. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, he began to understand the famous Winston Churchill definition of the Soviet Union: a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. After a successful legal career, he turned his attention to another love, writing. He is the author of a great new book, Paris Nights: Escape from Moscow. The novel is described by reviewers as an international thriller and unforgettable love story. It has a high rating by Amazon Book Reviews. We welcome Bill Sunshine for his first appearance on Saving America.
It's a pleasure to be here, David. Thank you.
Great to have you. And as you know, we ask our guests 3 questions, and we try and get our audience engaged in that. So tell us how growing up during the Cold War influenced your writing of this book.
Well, let me go back to grade school, and it's a faint memory, but there was always a feeling that America and Russia would be in a nuclear war. And we actually had nuclear war practices. As silly as it may seem, we would be taken into the hallway, and we'd get up against the wall, sit down, and put our head between our knees. So looking back on it, it may seem funny and ridiculous. That would never have protected us against an atomic bomb. But that's what they did in those days. And we didn't understand anything about Russia. And Russia was very, very closed off to the West. And there was very little information coming out of Russia. So my father, who was born in Ukraine in 1909, came to America. He wound up in Georgia, went to Emory Law School, great American, believed in America, would not speak about Russia, neither would his friends. And so obviously there were very negative feelings about Russia. As you just mentioned, David, the Soviet Union collapsed in 1992, and we began to understand exactly what Winston Churchill had said. It's a puzzle wrapped in an enigma, and slowly we began to peel the onion and get to the middle of the onion. And this book is more of a culmination of my search for the truth about what are the Russians. They're white, just like we are. They have they believe in Russian, I suppose, Catholicism, Russian Orthodox religion. And what is it that has made them so different? Why are they different? What is the history of Russia? And unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, what is described in this book is my effort to bring a complete reality to the reader. It's also a thriller, and the characters are very real. I've been to Russia. I've talked to officials in Russia. I don't claim to have the same knowledge and understanding of Russia as a Russian citizen. But let me just say this: Russia is not what we see in a James Bond film. And it's not the ongoing thriller, and the relations between the two countries are not that way. It's much deeper, and the division between Russia and the rest of the world is considerable, as we see. They have marched across Ukraine, and they have virtually destroyed large segments of Ukraine. And interestingly, the first 1/3 of my book begins with the infamous siege of Leningrad. Leningrad is now St. Petersburg. When the war began, when World War II began, Leningrad had over 2 million people. The Germans parked their armies about 20 miles away on a hill. They bombed the city without mercy, almost instantly destroyed the food warehouses. That winter, the greatest freeze in Russian history occurred. By the end of the war, there were only 600,000 surviving people in that city. My book begins there. That's where the characters meet. My lead character is Vitaly Solzhenitsyn, who is a Jew. But the interesting thing is that in that era, all religions were prohibited in the Soviet Union, and all books and literature about religions were prohibited. And Jews, as well as Muslims and other minorities, knew very little about their past and their history, and they could not really understand why they were being persecuted. The book, at about page 100, goes back to Moscow. Moscow is a city that is not in shambles, but is in a terrible condition following the war. Joseph Stalin is in power, and I mention this because so many people today really don't know about Stalin, who was one of the great killers of all time. It's said that he murdered as many as 30 million Russians to achieve his goals. Great murderer, fortunately died in 1953. The country has had slow progress. Essentially, my character returns to Moscow at the end of the war and is unable to, and he's an engineer, he's a war hero who has lost an arm, and he's unable to find meaningful employment.
And Bill, that ties into our second question, because one of the things that you talk about in this book that I consider myself pretty well read and actually very familiar with World War II from a historical standpoint is that if you could share with our audience the secret of the underground millionaires of communist Russia and how that plays a key part in your book, because that's where your character becomes engaged in that, correct?
Definitely, definitely. Let me mention that I came across an old copy of Fortune magazine, which was actually published in 1981. And the headlines on the outside of the magazine was Russia's Underground Millionaires. And a book was about to be published in the United States by a gentleman by the name of Konstantin Simas. And Simas was very high up in the Soviet Justice Department. And I say that tongue in cheek because I don't think there was ever any justice in the Soviet Union, nor do I think
Very little
today. And he had published a book about the USSR, The Corrupt Society. It was about to be published in the United States. The KGB found out about Konstantin Simas's book. They gave him 3 days to get out of the country and to move to the United States. The article in Fortune magazine mentions a professor at the University of California, Berkeley, by the name of Greg Grossman. My daughter was a student at Cal Berkeley. I called Grossman and made an appointment, told him I was interested in perhaps writing a book on the subject. He was the world expert on the underground economy in the Soviet Union. And what happened was that after World War II, the Russians were virtually incapable of making quality Western goods. David, you're wearing a beautiful red tie. And that red tie, if it were manufactured in the Soviet Union in that era, somebody in the Kremlin would decide on what the color would be. Somebody would decide on what company would do the dye. Another company would decide on the material. And if it were in the United States, that could be manufactured in 60 days, maybe 30. In Russia, it was 2 or 3 years, and it was inferior quality. At that time, The Soviet Union was controlled by the Communist Party of about 2 million people. They controlled 200 million people. And the people who ran the country, the high officials of the Communist Party, desperately needed quality, Western quality goods. And they turned to some Jews, some Muslims, other people whom they thought were very qualified to start secret businesses. And these businesses would manufacture quality Western goods. They didn't have to worry about advertising costs or distribution costs because they were guaranteed to have rooms in the back of great department stores. There's a great department store on Red Square that I've been in called GUM, G-U-M. And if you were Mrs. Khrushchev or the wife of a high Soviet official, you'd be privately escorted into that room. So my key character goes back to Russia, cannot get a job. He's a highly qualified engineer. And by the way, this is based on historical fact. And the details are overwhelming. And the reader's going to feel like, my God, I'm walking the streets of Russia. I know these people. This is, and I've had many people tell me this. You're just absolutely absorbed into the reality. And the reality then is not much different to what it is now. It's gone full scale. It's a controlled world. You don't dare speak up against the war. If you do, even if you're a child, your parents are in danger. So my key character goes back, out of desperation, buys into a group that's manufacturing quality women's clothing at night within a Soviet factory. And he builds a nationwide successful enterprise. And this is based on something that really happened. And he becomes ultra wealthy. He decides that he wants to name the company and use what they do in the West. In the West, you have different brands, as we know, many brands today. And he decides, look, let's call it Paris Nights. So in the book, not only do the people want to escape from Moscow as they do today, and my leading character wants to escape with the love of his life to Paris, but they operate a company called Paris Nights. Now, the danger is, although...
And Bill, I'm going to interrupt you just briefly because that gets into our planned third question, which is the story of Paris Nights, the second part, which says escape from Moscow. So how would your character get escape from Moscow? Because that's the pivotal end of the book, correct? Don't tell people the total end, but give them a clue as to where the book goes from there, because you've got to run a successful enterprise, underground enterprise, correct? And then he confronts some different issues, because you can't really monetize things in the Soviet Union. You can have money, but you can't leave with it, right?
Well, that's absolutely correct. He and the other millionaires are close friends, and their word is their bond. You do not lie in that society. If you tell somebody you're going to deliver something for such and such price, and if you don't do it, you are excluded from that society. But in that society, as you get rich and you go to gambling parties where you gamble millions and you eat wonderful food, you can't go out in the public and buy a Mercedes-Benz or a Jaguar because you call attention to yourself. And capitalism is a capital, it's a punishable by death in the old Soviet Union, firing squad, or if you're lucky, you get to go to prison. But what happens, and what happened there, is pretty much what happens in any political society. The only way you succeed is you share your wealth with the high elements of the Communist Party. But within the Communist Party, there are other factions, and they want to participate in the wealth. And this actually happened. And if they're not getting enough, as many rubles or dollars, in Russia they call them rubles, and you are in a certain faction of the Communist Party, you try to expose what's going on with these underground millionaires. So that happened, and many of them wind up in criminal trials. And by the way, Dr. Grossman at Cal Berkeley gave me a box full of trial documents. He was immensely helpful to me. All of this stuff is based on reality. So you have one faction of the Communist Party trying to get control. And eventually, obviously, there's some compromises and they share the wealth. And if my hero is lucky, he gets to go on and continue in his business. At the same time, he knows he's being followed by the KGB. And within the KGB, there are factions. And this is historical truth. It's basically, you got to follow the money. And that's what it's all about. So the name of the company is Paris Knights. And he and the love of his life have promised each other that they eventually want to escape to Paris. And that theme comes up over and over and over. I'm not going to reveal the ending, but it's you're going to feel like you're there. You're going to begin to understand what we're up against today with Russia, who's allied with China, who is allied with Iran, who's allied with North Korea. And unfortunately, it feels very ominous and it's not very comfortable. What do you think, David?
I think you're on the right track, and it does seem indeed. In fact, my understanding is that Putin has actually said publicly that it's his intention to reconstruct the USSR. And my reading on that, I believe that Putin in the later days of the USSR was actually a KGB operator. And so it's one of the ways that he was able to manipulate himself to power. So I think it ties in, the story ties in dramatically with what he is trying to recreate today. And even his invasion of Ukraine ties in with the way that Stalin used his advantage at the end of World War II to seize the countries that were adjacent to Russia and create the USSR that's featured in your book. Bill, we try and keep this to a certain length. We could go on for quite a while, but tell our audience how they can get more information about this book.
Well, I'm working on my website. The book is available at Amazon Books. I'd go to Amazon Books, type my name in, Bill Sunshine, Paris Knights, Escape from Moscow. It's getting good reviews. We're just getting it launched, and I view it as a truth-telling and a thriller. And I think, David, I think your viewers will enjoy it quite a bit.
Thanks for joining me for Saving America. If you have questions or comments, please find me on various social media sites. I'm Dr. David D. Schein, and I will see you next week.
Welcome to USA Global TV and Radio, where our mission is to provide education, entertainment, hope, and inspiration. USA Global TV and Radio connects you with experts and audiences all around the world every single day to help you succeed in business and to live a richer life. Visit us at usaglobaltv.com to learn about career and life-changing training and mentoring programs like the Listening Mentor. Subscribe to our newsletter to stay informed about our special programs and offers. Discover how you can become a guest on one of our shows or a host or producer of a USA Global TV and Radio show of your very own. That's USA Global TV and Radio, where the doctor is always in.